In my previous videos of my children's books and my adult novels, I've dealt with the um, more dramatic side of the work. So this morning, it's a quiet day outside, so I thought I would do a more sort of, I won't say peaceful, but less dramatic, shall we say. Elizabeth, my main character in Darkness into Light, uh, is walking. It's a snowy morning, and she's walking down to Mass to the local town of Redduff, and for the first time, she notices the changes that have taken place in the past 25 years. And so here we go. Okay. The air was cold and sharp, and silence uh, reigned supreme as I walked to Mass that morning along the snow-covered streets. Plumes of smoke rose high from the chimneys, perfuming the still air with a pungent smell of turf. A sudden gust of wind scattered snow off the top of a fir tree, causing the flakes to waltz through the air, dazzling white against the equally dazzling blue sky. Even Redruff looked pretty this morning. I nodded to the few people I knew, or I thought I knew, I felt I should know. I hadn't walked through the town in ages. Some of the shop fronts were freshly painted, and there were one and two new shops too. The supermarket was a great addition to the town, but was more expensive than those in Dublin, and the range of goods limited. As a child, I loved to peer through the exotic fruits and spices of Smith's of the Green when Father took me to Dublin as a treat. Mrs. Cleary's shop had a smart new canopy and was called Pandora's Box, and to my surprise, she was selling expensive Italian and French clothes. There were more plastic shop fronts. Why would they consider progress? Trees were planted in Market Square. Was Redduff going to enter the Tidy Towns competition? Now that really would be progress. Murphy's Pub was no longer a lounge bar. It had a nightclub. The town was certainly humming. But of course more people came home from the city at weekends now. In days long gone, they came home as little as possible. Dublin offered too much freedom and entertainment. In spite of the icy conditions, I was surprised at the number of cars parked outside the church. I noticed a BMW and two Mercedes, and even the older cars were clean and well maintained. It was a far cry from the days of traps and carts and bicycles and people trudging to Mass on foot. The inside of the church was painted pale yellow. I detested the virgin blue it had before. Looking around, I wondered where I could sit, certainly not near the two old dears who were eyeing everyone going up the aisle. They were the only ones wearing headscarves. I remembered when women had to cover their heads before going to a church and wore their best clothes on Sundays. Mass in those days was like a fashion parade. What prayer would I recite was my next decision. There was no time for prayers in the old days, as we had to concentrate on our missals to follow what was going on. Latin on the left side, English on the other. Or was it the other way around? Sorry, I just go back in that little bit. Latin on the left side and English on the other. Or was it the other way around? I'd better start. Hail Mary, full of grace. At that moment, the altar lights were turned on. Pity they didn't ring bells anymore when the priest appeared. I missed the smell of incense too, which, when swung in the censer from side to side, would all but obscure the altar in a blue aromatic haze. There was the new priest John was talking about. He was rather young, good looking too. What a waste. Priests should be allowed to marry and have children, create a family union instead of living a lonely life. I hoped the sermon wouldn't be too long. Communion is the bread of life, the priest paused and stared inquiringly at the congregation. I always think it's sad when people come to Mass and don't receive communion. Don't they realize what an integral part of Mass it is? Not receiving communion is like running a marathon and not being interested in winning. A marathon? Why a marathon? The priest was standing outside after us, and only a couple of people went over to shake his hand. Old Father Fogarty would have shouted at you who passed him by, and here This priest was standing out in the cold and being virtually ignored. I went over and congratulated him on the sermon, and he seemed pleased. My good deed for the day. I'm John O'Neill's sister from Ballyone, and I added by way of introduction, I'm very grateful for your visits to my mother. It comes with the job. He gave me a broad grin. I suppose it does. I was only joking. I feel I know you already. Your mother often talks to you about you. She does? You're her only daughter, aren't you? My expression of surprise was obvious. In my limited experience, mother tells strangers what they never tell their nearest and dearest. Now, that was an exaggeration, whatever there was, when I told myself as I walked carefully down the icy steps from the church. The priest was just being kind. How could mother have spoken to him? A nice thought, though. Pity there weren't priests like him in the old days. Hello, Elizabeth. What a surprise. For a moment I was confused, and turning I saw Mary Cleary standing there. Her accent had gone all posh. Probably sold more clothes that way. I smiled politely before noting the well-dressed children. Sorry, I've just decided if I'd continue on up there. Whoops. Anyway, I think I'll leave it there because I think it gives you an idea of how much Ireland was changing, and indeed it continues to change. But the changes from the 50s to the 80s was very dramatic in a social sense. From then on, the 90s, it changed in other aspects. Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.